Hi all, I'm going to show you real quickly the power of adding numbers to your chords. This is a great way to make something sound very simple and to then give it more texture. So as all my white notes up to, well, all the way through even all the black notes, but especially white notes up through green notes, we're learning that chords are built on 1, 3, and 5. So all chords are 1, 3, and 5. So what I want you guys to know then is you can always add a number to 1, 3, and 5 to add more texture. So another number would be like a 2. That's the go-to. I love adding number 2 to my chords. Okay. You can always add number 6. It's still a C chord, but it adds texture. Now, if you leave out numbers, if you were to leave out, like let's say number 5, and you hit number 6, that's now an A minor inverted chord, okay? So that's why for this kind of technique, you want to leave in 1, 3, and 5 as you add numbers, okay? So as I said, you can add number 2, you can add number 6, and then for really nice sound as well, you can add number 7, and this is actual major 7. Remember, the major 7 is a half step away from the octave. You can check out some of my other videos and I'll explain that as well. But in number 7, just adding that as well. And you guys then who have also seen the pentatonic video know that you can actually add numbers such as 2 and 6. See it? Doesn't sound rough. Adds a lot more texture. Okay, so the only number then that we've not put in, and we'll talk about half steps on a different video because usually you don't add those. So for example, you wouldn't add number 1, 2, 2.5, and 3. Half steps create conflict, which is what we're going to talk about number 4. 1, 3, and 5. Number 4 is the only one that then actually has this half step right here in between. All the others are a whole step. But as soon as you go ahead and add number 4, there's this half step that creates a bit of conflict and dissonance, okay? You still can do it, by the way. If all of a sudden you actually hit a 4, it's not bad, okay? But this sound right here of number 4 creates suspension, which wants to resolve back to number 3. So by actually leaving out number 3 when you go to this suspension, which is number 4, 1, 4, 5, it wants to resolve. That creates that suspended sound. This is a sound that was used a lot. You know, nobody really watches news anymore, I guess, but whenever they'd have the nightly news, you have suspended chords. That makes it sound like there's an urgent message because it not only has a suspended sound that wants to resolve, but it can actually create suspension. So for those of you who are writing more music and are arranging stuff, check out some other videos, but this is definitely used whenever you're writing music, okay? But this is what makes a suspension a suspension. Notice it's the only chord that we actually are going to use letters to define. So for example, this is a C2, C6, okay? You know, we talked about, well, this is a CMAJ7 to just clarify that, but this would also be a C7. Check out the other video, C7 versus CMAJ7. But CSUS is right there. And it's because it's a suspension. It's really number 4, but you leave out number 3, okay? To those suspensions, you can always then add numbers, like a C suspension 2. That's John Williams kind of stuff right there. Okay. Suspensions also really create a nice arpeggiated effect. So even if the chord said in music that, you know, when you're playing, it just says a C chord, you can play a suspension whenever you want. And suspensions create that really nice, especially for arpeggios, that nice flare effect. Rather than just being a 1, 3, 5 arpeggio, it sounds so classical and just too perfect. If you want that texture, put 1, 4, and 5 in there and do suspensions up the piano. Okay? One more quick thing about suspensions. Now that you guys know the numbers and about suspensions, Elton John uses them a lot. Gospel music uses a lot. Whenever it just says a C chord, you can always go back and forth between a suspension and the chord you're on. sounds much better than just sitting on the chord. So if you're given just 2 chords in a song, to make it sound more interesting, you can always then add that quick suspension and then get back to your chord. Another quick thing that you also need to know is because the suspension is number 4, okay, when you invert and you put that F down here, okay, you actually already have part of the F chord. Here's an F chord when you invert. And if you were to take that G and put it down here, it's an F2 chord. So suspensions invert nicely. For those of you who are black notes, you're going to understand this. But if I'm in tonic, my tonic is a C chord, and I make this suspension, it actually is a great way to create a subdominant, chord number 4. So there's a great way to sound like you're going back and forth between 1 and 4. Who do things like Tom Petty's Free Falling. It's a 1 to the 4. Again, that's a 1 to the 4. 4, 1, 5. You also, in substitution, can just do the suspension. 1 to the suspension. Suspension, 1, 5. As we just talked, sounds too simple, make it a suspension. Make it a suspension too. Add texture to your notes. So instead of music just sounding so, perfect with all the 1, 3, and 5s, add suspensions, 2s, 6s, 7s.